Yeah, and a good tip, when you're not talking, mute yourself.
Yep, good point. Oh, Leahy, can you there as far as the polls and stuff goes, so if we're in the middle of a discussion, what folks will see as a poll pop up. Um, if you just want it out of the way, I think you can like click on the X. Don't there sometimes a message pops up that's like end poll, and we don't want to do that because that like shuts down the whole the whole poll process. So just hit the X to clear it and get it out of your field of view. Of course, you're welcome to answer the poll if you would like as well.
Okay, I think we're ready to start. Hello, it's been a while. I'm Lihi. Good to have you back. When the numbers are climbing in the chat, I see more and more familiar names. It always warmed my heart, especially now in the holiday season, that I get emotionally very fast. So good to see all the familiar names in here. Today, we're going to have a very interesting session, as you've seen in the different publications that we had. We have Ranger with us and Chris, and we encourage you to use the chat and join the polls, because then we will see what you think, right? It's not just about us. We are the facilitators, but we want to hear what you have to say. So we'll start with a very short introduction, and then Ranger will take us to the scenarios, and we will have panel discussions based on the different stage of the exercise. Some of you know the drill, but if you're new, Ranger will give you a better idea how this exercise works. Just a little bit about us. Today we have a lot of our team members joining us in the panel. We do a lot of things at EIS. We've been operating for almost 15 years now. We do publications like ePro handbooks. We just launched the last one that I will talk about this in a minute. We do EarthX training like this one. We do this in corporations. We do this in governmental entities. Happy to help. And we not only talk, we actually develop. We develop a genome that you will hear about this soon as well. And we do summits, we do webinars. We just had our London event that some of you here participated. And basically what we do, we bring people together from different sectors to have a conversation about how we can make this world more resilient. It's a big vision, it's a big mission, but we have been working very hard to achieve that. And you're part of this. And this is very important that you're here because everyone that is here is helping us to spread the word. If it's while sharing our content with others, is joining our events, visiting our YouTube channel. We have so many resources there that you can learn from, like knowledge bites that we produce on different aspects of resilience. You can find all recording of our past events on our website and our YouTube channel. I promise, and I usually try to keep my promises. Everyone who's here could go to our Amazon ePro handbook page. I will post the link after, but if you do a search, you could easily find it. And you can download our Kindle version until the 23rd of December. So it's free. This is our ePro last handbook about Black Start that you probably hear about that as well today. So go get your gift, your Christmas gift or Hanukkah or whatever. Maybe Paul could share a few words. I don't know if Gil joined us or not. No, I don't see Gil here. So maybe he is here. Gil.
Gil.
Hi, Gil.
Yeah, I'm here.
Can you tell us a bit about Genome and the new developments?
Sure, glad to. So hi everyone, my name is Gil Caney. I'm head of product. And I'd like to talk a bit about Genome. Genome stands for Global Infrastructure Network Optimization Model, but that aside, it's an advanced decision support platform designed to simulate, analyze, and optimize the resilience of critical infrastructure systems. It's a system that we're developing, and at its core, Genome models the behavior of complex systems and interaction of systems and all their interdependencies. So if we're talking about infrastructure, it can be the power grids, the water supply networks, the transportation system, telecommunication, and other sectors. And it helps us uncover the risks and vulnerabilities from the first order connection and second and third order effects of something. And we'll see this in this exercise, that an action in one place can affect all the other sectors. So this is the system that right now we're developing. And if this sounds interesting to you, feel free to reach out to us and we can talk more about this.
Thank you, Gil, for sharing with us the new advancement that we have. We have actually a very big team of developers, and Gil is the head of product, and we are running very fast. So we are always looking for partners. So if anyone is interested, just give me a call. Okay, so next, I would like to give the stage to my friend, Dr. Chris Beck, who could tell you a little bit about Black Skies if you're new to this term.
Thanks, Leahy. Chris Beck, the Chief Scientist and Vice President for Policy at EIS Council. That's a long, fancy title that basically means I work for Leahy. So thank you for the introduction. A Black Sky event is a large footprint. So for the US reference, multiple states, even multiple FEMA regions nationwide, and long duration. And those two are both important. A power outage with those two characteristics is something we, as a society and as a world, want to avoid. And that's our core mission at EIS Council. So what could cause such a Black Sky event? We have some natural threats. We're going to talk about those today. The first one you see, extreme solar storms, will be a key component of today's exercise. But earthquake in the wrong place, like the New Madrid Fault, climate change challenges with increasing intensity of storms, etc. And we've just made it through a pandemic that we all felt the impact of, and but for my money, it was a pretty easy one. We could have a lot more challenging event in the future. let's move on to the next slide. So as I said, we're going to talk about one of the natural threats today will be a key component, a solar storm. We just had one in May of this year, which was significant. Thankfully, there has been, we didn't just get lucky. There has been significant progress made by our friends at NERC and FERC to prepare the electric grid for such a storm. We still had some impacts, but I would say we're encouraged by the actions that were taken. However, we can't rest on our laurels because it wasn't the most massive storm we've ever seen. Significant, but well shy of what our benchmark worst storm that we know about is the Carrington event of 1859. So everyone is noticing additional extreme weather events that are happening, etc. So any of these natural events could cause a massive blackout. We also have malicious events that can happen. A cyber attack, an act of war. We're dealing with both of those now globally. Cyber attacks are happening right now as we're having this discussion. War is going on right now as we're having this discussion, and attacks on critical infrastructure are part of both of those threats. We can even have a combination, which I think we're going to get into today, which is a natural event happens and then an opportunistic malicious attack as a follow-up. And thankfully, we have a wonderful panel of experts joining us today. So I'd like to make a quick introduction to everyone. These will be short to save time. Everyone's bio is extremely impressive, and I could keep us all here for the remainder of the time to go through them all. But let me just so kind of name and title only. You'll hear from them all. John Twitchell is with EIS Council as electrical engineer by training and profession, as is Dee Makunda from National Grid in the UK. Alexander Karachenko as well from joining us from Ukraine. And we're looking forward to hearing from there. Scott Blevins is on our team. He is our communications expert. And Brigadier General Robert Spalding, also here from Semper. Let's see, finally, the emergency management and cross-sector folks. Dave Maxwell is an EIS Council alum. Lourdes Gutierrez with FEMA. And Dr. Greg Autry is here as an expert in space systems, and he understands how such an event would impact those things, including communications and GPS, etc., things that we now rely on. I think at this point, I will hand the mic and the baton to Ranger, our master exercise practitioner, to take us through the rest of the exercise. Ranger, the floor is yours.
And we have Lourdes. We forgot Lourdes.
I didn't forget Lourdes. I said Lourdes from FEMA. Maybe I was talking too fast. Hi, Lourdes. Sorry if I don't think I skipped over you, but if I did, I apologize.
Maybe I was screaming. Ranger, the floor is yours.
All right, I am attempting to bring up the PowerPoint. Can you see the PowerPoint?
Yes.
All right, thank you. It did not give me the option to bring over sound.
Now,
So
you need to do it again. I took my slides off and now you can put yours.
okay. All right, let me do it again. My apologies. Going back and forth makes it difficult.
No worries.
Okay, Leahy, it is not allowing me to transfer sound. So my apologies on this. We may have to ask you to play the videos.
No worries. Okay.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and start this and continue on. All right, so we have three phases. Our apologies for the clunkiness of this, but because we have videos as part of this, we kind of have to move back and forth. We're going to give the scenario presentation, then we're going to have panel discussions. And because of what we're dealing with here, we're going to do this in a certain order. We're going to start with electric because we expect the consequences of the events to impact electric perhaps the most, followed by communications. And then what we want to do is explore from our emergency management folks, what does this mean to us? And so we'll go panel by panel. I have a few questions that I'll be asking. Some will go to different members. Some will be for all of the panels. But at the end of that, we want to have a cross-panel discussion. And then if Chris has any, I'll call it subject matter expert input from any of the questions that are lying out there, because this isn't something everybody knows a lot about. We'll go ahead and do that. And then if we capture any pertinent audience questions in chat, we'll try to ask those. We'll do this in each phase. We'll stop for time as we have to, just to be able to move on. That's it's unfortunate, but that's just a reality. We'll talk about coronal mass ejections and why we should care about them. If you're not familiar with them, Chris mentioned one event. We're also aware of 6 other events that were earlier in history and were much more destructive than the one in the 1800s. So this is something that we probably don't know as much as we'd like to about. And it is something that doesn't give us much time to prepare or think about it. We spot say a asteroid coming for 100,000 miles, and we have some time to deal with it. That's one thing. It's happening now, and it'll be here soon. We are approaching the solar maximum. Some indicate we are already there. This is a time when we can have significant solar flares. We did have the one. We're expecting to have some more. And as we move through the solar maximum, we will continue to have those chances, although it can happen at any time. When we do have a solar flare, we have immediate impacts arrive in about 8 minutes. That's microwaves, radiation, gamma rays. But then there's a coronal mass ejection that comes towards Earth. That shows up in roughly about 15 hours. Right now, we're in December, and NASA's NOAA is monitoring 3849, which has had 20 solar flares during the current 11-year cycle. It's ready to go. And the key in here is being ready to go and being aimed at exactly where it will impact Earth, and with a direct blow is the big concern. Last solar flare a week ago, this is simulated, was aimed away from Earth, was measured as an 8.2, which is significant. All right. We are now going to see if we're going to get the video.
I'm not hearing the sound, I don't think. I'm not.
Me neither. So I'll vamp some sound here. We have some experts that are talking about what a solar storm is. It's a ejection of material from the sun. When it impacts Earth, it causes a
solar storm is a star quake. It's a powerful burst of energy that comes from the sun.
Okay.
In the 19th century, we had the Carrington incident, which was a huge space weather impact on Earth. Literally the only electric technology that existed at that time was the telegraph system. There were sparks flying from the telegraph systems, fires broke out. The new thing is not the space weather, the new thing is that modern society is extremely dependent on electricity.
We have activated the BSX network as a precautionary measure, and we are providing sector updates relating to the communication and control system disruptions. Summarizing this unfolding event, Sunspot 3275 has exhibited heightened activity in recent days, culminating in the release of a massive solar flare classified as an X30 event among the strongest historically. This flare was accompanied by significant ionizing radiation that has overwhelmed a lot of the satellite measuring equipment. There's also been outages at communication networks across regions of the US, Europe, and Asia, affecting cell phone, radio, and shortwave. It's estimated that the associated coronal mass ejection, or CME, will impact Earth's magnetosphere within about 15 hours and cause severe geomagnetic disturbances worldwide.
All right. Thank you, Leahy. My apologies for the lack of ability to play that in there. So,
No worries.
yes.
Okay.
All
Go
right.
ahead.
So
Go ahead.
Okay. Are you seeing my PowerPoint again? This is
Stay with mine. Don't worry. I'll do that.
all right.
Don't worry. Just
So
go ahead.
all right. So we've gone ahead and noticed what's happened here. We see the flare. We're going to call this an X45. This is rivaling the largest one that's been measured from 2003. Sensors have been damaged in several satellites. We have monitoring this. Arrivals in 15 hours. Radio communications are already disrupted. So what we have is something that has happened with immediate impacts, but we know that there are going to be impacts coming. Communications impacts are immediate. Some satellites are damaged. GPS and others are going offline due to the energy coming through. But in 15 hours, we're going to have a significant issue. So we're looking at it coming in for Europe and North America and likely South America. And with that, what I'm going to do is take us to our panel discussion. So what I want to do is start with the electric panel, and please go ahead and come up with your cameras. I'm going to stop sharing so we can see your faces. We'll start this again here in a bit, as soon as I can stop sharing. All right, starting with the electric panel. What can a CME induced geomagnetic disturbance do to the electric grid? So for our electric folks, is this a concern for what's started here and what's coming in 15 hours?
Hi. Hello.
Go ahead, Dima.
Hi.
Thank you.
I was wondering if I could take this question first as a national grid representative here.
Of course.
Yeah, so coronal mass ejections are a known risk for grid system both in the UK and the US, and rely greatly on advance notice in order to prepare the grid for the upcoming storm. So we work with forecasters and modelers in advance to know which areas of the grid and which nodes are most vulnerable or most at risk when it comes to coronal mass ejections. Our prior modeling has identified around 13 transformers in the UK that are most vulnerable out of 950 supergrid transformers. And if they were to experience damage, then that might result in local power disruptions for areas for up to a few hours. In preparation of these storms, the most likely is our electricity system operators in the UK and the US would respond by ensuring that the substations that are vulnerable have spare parts and spare transformers ready to be replaced immediately, ensure that any substations that have been taken out for service or have been taken out for maintenance are returned online in order to support the grid and support particular areas that are going to be vulnerable. So this is a lot of our preparation relies on first advance notice of the upcoming of these mass ejections and ensuring that the grid is already resilient for them. This is why it's so important to invest in our resilience and crisis management planning in advance.
All right, thank you. John, any thoughts on this as well?
I have to agree with Dima. What you should have as an electric utility is you should have a study, and Dima indicated that they have a study that has identified critical areas of their grid. You develop a plan for what are you going to do with your system to mitigate the things that your study showed, and then you communicate the plan to other transmission operators, and you also implement your plan. And implementing your plan can be things like readjusting your generation dispatch to reduce the loading on transformers. You may have key high voltage transformers that you have to take out of service, which means you then reconfigure your system so that your load can be served. And you may have to be able to tolerate localized blackouts. And all of these things that happen, the storm we had in the northern US in May of last year showed all the things that you read about actually happen as a result of a flare.
All right, thank you, John. What actions would you be taking? I understand that you would have a plan. Are there specific actions that you would take as the CME approaches once it's forecast to be exceptionally strong? I heard some mentions of the plan, but is it taking down parts of the grid related to those transformers? I heard a little bit about small outages. If we were talking a very strong CME coming towards us, would there be larger impacts expected up front?
Okay, I'll answer that. In most cases, the best case scenario how you would hope for is that you have spare parts and spare grid transformers that you're able to replace the transformers that have already been damaged. In a say a black sky event, or maybe you might have to take a transformer out of service, then that would mean that you're taking a local area out of service that might result in a disconnection for a local area for a few hours. And you would rely on, of course, the advanced warning that you receive from the Met Office or from NOAA or from NASA in order to know which areas are most likely going to be impacted and ensure that your local generators are able to support the load if your transformer is not back in time, back to ensure the return of the demand. Now, during this operation, of course, the control room engineers at National Grid Control Center would be continuously monitoring the state of the system using the MAGIC tool and assessing which assets that are most at risk of resulting in a damage. So you're making a decision: is it worth if taking the area out of service for a few hours is in order to protect an equipment to ensure that it can go back and support the grid as soon as possible. That is, in case you don't have a grid a spare transformer available. So the control engineers and the engineers in the control room would be constantly making these decisions on, first, how do we reduce the risk to the people and to the customer, and secondly, how do we protect our assets?
All right, thank you. Anything additional on the U.S. grid, John, before we move on to communications?
Yes, one last thing. It is extraordinarily difficult to remove damaged high voltage transformers and replace them with a spare if you have a spare and if it's on site. So your energy management team in the control room has to do as Dima said. You must mitigate the risk of damage as much as possible. And a localized blackout that lasts for several hours is generally preferable to operating transformers at higher levels, which may result in damage and then outages for an extraordinary long period of time.
All right, thank you, Dave. I'd like to take a couple of questions to the communications group here. The initial energy impact, do you have an idea of what type of things we would see from satellites? We're talking that first 8 minutes, and then I want to move to satellites and then on to other forms of communication.
Well, based off a lot of things I've read, you will get a lot of impact on the satellites initially. That could interfere with their ability to communicate, especially as it energizes the ionosphere, and especially the ones that are in low Earth orbit. Those are going to be the ones that are mostly impacted by it. So you could start to see disruptions with their ability to, send signals back and forth to the Earth, which in turn not only disrupts communications, but can interrupt what we call precision networking timing, or position networking timing, which is your GPS. A lot of other systems rely on having accurate timing, and they get that from the satellite. So if that gets disrupted, then you can see other disruptions further down the line that's caused from that disruption in timing. And of course, a lot of impacts with to things like GPS that rely on that. You also have some impacts into the HF radio bands. That is what we use for long distance communications. And one of the key elements that uses HF communications is your transatlantic flights. So you could see some disruptions with their ability to communicate as they're flying across the ocean.
Okay, to me, those
Yeah, I'd
sound
like to-
significant. Yes, please.
Yeah, I'd like to continue on that. He mentioned the charging the ionosphere. One of the things that actually happens to the atmosphere expands. This can create a physical drag on the low Earth orbit constellations like SpaceX or Starlink, which could actually either drag them down or displace their orbits in ways that might be chaotic physically. And this is a probably permanent issue that would require replacement of those assets if they were not, in fact, literally fried by the incoming CME. So you've got some pretty permanent impact potentials there as well.
Yeah, the atmospheric drag, like you said, it can create that. And then, if you get them off track too much, then you end up towards the Kessler syndrome, which is when they all start running
Exactly.
out there. And then
Yeah, you could
that just ruins
cause
the entire,
unintended collisions.
that just ruins the entire satellite capability at that point if we ever get there.
Greg, this is a quick question to bubble up from our chat. Do you think that in that ionospheric expansion that creates the drag on the satellites, would you expect any of those satellites to actually make it all the way to the ground in a crash, or would they typically just burn up or be disrupted and still be either in space or kind of cook in the atmosphere?
Yeah, that's a very small risk. They will most likely burn up, and if any parts did hit the ground, they're very unlikely to hit anybody, since the vast majority of their surface is unoccupied and water, in fact. So I wouldn't worry about the risk of that, because these are particularly small. With larger things like, say, the International Space Station, that's a serious concern. That is a big, dangerous item, and should it lose station keeping control and be unable to be re-uplifted, obviously it would be a serious threat to the 6 or so people on board, but it could in fact be a threat to people down below.
Thank you.
All right.
In fact, I saw a NASA report that said that if the space station re-entered completely uncontrolled, that there was about a 1 in 10 chance of human casualties.
That is significant. So we're hearing a number of impacts. Dr. Spaulding, did you have any things on this one in particular?
Yeah, depending on whether or not the data centers that hold the network cores are affected, you could see either limited if the towers are affected, or widespread loss of cell networks. And depending on the damage, those could be down for quite some time. The other challenges that comes, because a lot of the power grids now are leveraging these cell networks to run software that allows the grid to balance as it's being brought back up. If there is a grid failure and there's a need to bring the grid back up, if these networks are gone, then that software is not going to be able to work. And in the past, the engineers were trained to do it manually. A lot of that training no longer exists. And so things could be out for a while.
All right, thank you. My understanding is Starlink lost about 200 of their satellites due to impact of previous solar storms and that drag that was mentioned. They launch quite a few from the California coast and East Coast on a regular basis, but when it's the one that you're depending on for your communications, that might be important. So what we've done now is we've kind of kicked a couple of legs out from under our infrastructure related to electric and communications. So I want to take this over to emergency management. What are you going to tell the public after this 8 minutes and before the 15-hour mark? And what about the folks who are dependent on either the communications directly or say medical equipment, hospitals, others who depend on the grid? And so I'll ask our emergency managers to comment on that. Lourdes or Dave?
Yeah, I'll take this one. First of all, good afternoon to everyone. I see people from all over the world, so that's super exciting for us. We keep spreading the word. From the emergency management perspective, I wanted to bring some foundational knowledge about how we do messaging. There are plenty of mechanisms that have been tested, at least in the US, over and over again, because we get natural events and disasters constantly. So the coordination of this messaging is going to be the key. How do we provide this message to the public? How timely can we do it? How clear that messaging is going to be? As an emergency managers, we do not bring the message. That's why we have the panelists that were talking before me. They're the experts. They're going to tell emergency manager agencies at all levels of government, federal, local, state, tribal, territorial, because for us, response starts with the community and ends with the community. So this messaging have to be tailored to the audience, but it have to be consistent. We cannot have different people saying different things because that will create panic. So taking that in consideration that there are already mechanisms in place like joint operation centers where all these public information officers from different levels, the private sector, come together for that messaging. Once that message has been tailored to the event, in this case, the CME, the first thing that we want to tell the people is what is it that we're dealing with. In a very basic plain language, this is a solar flare. It can do ABC. It can impact the infrastructure. You can experience extended blackouts. You might not be access to fuel on a very prolonged response. So all that has to be encompassed in that first message. In this scenario specifically, since we're starting T-15, we don't have much time to do like phasing out the messaging. The messaging has to be prepared now, and we have to provide the public as much information as possible up front, because we don't know what kind of communications we're going to have post-impact. So we have to be able to provide actionable messaging, clear communication, and some examples. The nature of the threat, again, the solar flare, what kind of impacts we can expect, and then advise them of immediate precautions. For us, we have a lot of tornadoes and hurricanes, and we have earthquakes. So we're gonna just expand in what we already messaging our public on a daily basis for other events. The only difference that I will expect for this messaging, that we're gonna tell them to prepare for a longer time, right? From a longer period of time, because we expect this based on the theory and the things that we're talking about, that this is gonna have a cascading effect where one system is gonna fail, it's gonna be a domino cascading effect that is gonna probably affect a lot of the critical lifelines that provide us the kind of life that we're living in our modern society, right? So immediate precautions for food, for medication, charging your cell phones, your devices, and also we're gonna have to tell them post-impact how they're gonna get their messaging. We don't know what is gonna be up. We don't know what kind of communication systems we're gonna be able to use. So we're gonna encourage the public to just trust and refer to only official channels. This is not the time to be in Facebook getting your news from someone that, you know, is trying to have likes. This is the time to just go to your officials, your NOAA, your Department of Energy, FEMA, your local emergency managers. This is the time just to rely on those sources that are going to provide the population the best. In terms of, in terms of the medical, they just need to have a backup system in place. And if they do not have one, they have to make sure that they relocate to a place where they can have a backup system. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And let's see, Dave, and then Chris.
Well, let me break in though, because I wanted to bring forward a question from the chat that I think Dave can respond to, and it kind of picks up on some of the themes that that Lourdes just laid out. This is a question from Ian Fox. Given the impact of such an event, it's clear the boots on the ground emergency response mechanisms will be required to operate independently and asynchronously over extended periods of time. How important is it for nations to have people with a clear understanding of what to do and how to behave, essentially zeroth responders, or even before first responders, capable of surviving till official help arrives? Dave?
Yeah, I think it's most important on our messaging to make sure we're telling people what is required, what they need to prepare for most: water, maybe have cash on hand. But we have to do that carefully, because you don't want to cause runs on Walmarts or the other stores for water. You don't want to cause runs on banks. So messaging has to be very careful to get the population as prepared as possible.
Yeah, I'm going to throw out a thought here. This will be the biggest 15-hour sale in the history of the Earth, just based on observed human behavior in the last couple of weeks, and when it came to hoarding at the start of COVID. I'm really concerned about messaging, but messaging that's believed, and the counter messaging that we're going to get from the combination of media and social media. I would say that is going to be one of the larger issues in this. So what I want to do is I'm going to ask Leahy to bring up the next video. We've brought in some of the questions in here from the participants, and we appreciate those. Keep loading up the chat with your questions and your answers, your solutions, because you are a part of the solution. So thank you very much. Let's watch the next video.
This is the Utilities Hub status report for electric, water, oil, natural gas, and communication sectors. As our EM director mentioned, over the past 24 hours, power grids have just been shutting down one by one around the world, apparently due to an anomaly in the Earth's magnetic Van Allen belt. South America and Southern North America were especially hard hit. In Los Angeles, following the grid collapse, communication systems began failing as backup power supplies were rapidly depleted. Traffic slowdowns started at intersections with down signal lights. With increasing signal outages, these slowdowns turned to gridlock. Abandoned vehicles began blocking roads, and after fuel supplies ran out, peripheral roads also became impassable. Going forward, water systems have about a day of backup fuel, so most of that is now exhausted. That means pressure is going to drop, affecting supply, starting with high elevations. As a result of the calm and traffic disaster, we can expect a rapid breakdown of food, medical supply, and pharmaceutical distribution, as well as first responder access. This is compounded by the fact that even in areas where GPS systems are operating, they are unreliable due to damage sustained by several communication satellites. Understand, there's immediate high demand from all sectors, and coordination personnel have limited capabilities to deconflict and prioritize needs.
Right,
this is the Utilities Hub status report for electric, water, oil, natural gas.
There we go. Thank you. All right. So we've now created a little bit of a worse set of conditions here. Really want to get your thoughts. Let's start with electric. Could this be a very long black sky event as presented here?
Well, in cases where let's say the worst case scenario, the impact of a solar storm, then we might, if we start losing part of the grid, then we would start thinking about black start event. Now National Grid regularly exercises black start events, and we have generators on site that are able to regenerate parts of the grid if it was lost. So we expect it if there was a loss of the grid, we expect it to be a few hours before we're able to regenerate it back in the UK, in our Northeast operations in the US. But I think the scenario is quite intense. I think we've taken it to the very worst case scenario. We hope that our mitigation has come in place before it reaches that point. So that's from a perspective, yeah.
Thank you. I did want to mention we've taken it to not the worst case scenario, but a near to the worst. The worst would be much more impactful. They describe this, if anybody wants to Google it, Miyake events. There have been 6 recorded in history, and they're much worse than what we're doing here. This is in geologic history as opposed to human history. But we're somewhere in between, but we did make it a significant event. John, I'd like you to answer that from the U.S. perspective regarding
From the
black
U.S.
start.
perspective, the good news is that because of the nature of the event, most electrical system equipment will be undamaged and will be available. And black start is a major black start event is not something that happens all the time, but it is rehearsed and it is practiced. So yes, there'd be a outage, but the system itself would be recoverable, and it would be a matter of a day or two as opposed to weeks before most of the electricity would be back.
All right, thank you. And I've watched a black start exercise for an earthquake demonstration, and over 8 hours, they even couldn't quite reach the cranking path to get things going for one portion of the grid. I think this would be interesting to actually game out and play through. And I saw some comments that a lot of emergency management folks are not really well acquainted with the potential for solar flares and CME. And this might be something for folks to exercise themselves. What I'd like to do now is ask about the GPS supported timing. For the electric, if you lose the GPS system, is that going to impact you, and how significantly?
So GPS, we rely on it on so much of our modern society relies on global positioning system in order for accurate timing. And in the case if we lose access to GPS, most of our operation would switch to using atomic clocks or network time protocol, and with sufficient notice of the upcoming of a coronal mass injections, then we expect we're able to adapt to that change. I'd like to bring attention to a recent research center that was launched in the UK back in 2020. It was at the time called the world's first national timing center, and its aim is to provide the UK with resilience and independence from the global positioning system. So it relies on the collaboration between multiple researchers across the UK who would use a grid of atomic clocks that are able to be relied upon in the case of a loss of GPS or satellite signals. I'll put the link to the National Preparedness Commission report in the chat just because I think it's very interesting and I think it's worth having access to it for our listeners.
Excellent. Thank you very much. John, same thing?
Same thing. We would go back to the old-fashioned way of the atomic clock. And now one thing that I think would be gone is in the US, we have the network of phase measurement. Phase measurement equipment is distributed widely across the North American grid. And that's all GPS, I believe. And that of course would be gone. So there would be a system analytic tool that would be lost until we had the GPS signal.
Okay. Let me take this to the communications panel. What do you have as a backup when you have a loss of either a significant number of satellites or a change of orbit of a number of satellites. How do we address that?
And let me jump in, Ranger, to just add to your question from the chat. Duncan Kennedy asks, what is the viability of using shortwave radio for first responders and government officials to communicate with the public once primary comms like satellite go down? Over.
Well, when you look at it from a satellite, you know, we're looking at a couple of different impacts in the communication. So you have the satellite that we've talked about, and not all those systems like the police and first responders and those guys are using satellite. So from that perspective, you know, we expect that some of their stuff would continue to operate. The couple of big problems that's going to cause the issues with communications as this thing progresses is one is, you know, we talked about having this fire sale, right? Everybody's going to rush in here and buy up all the food, water, everything else. Well, the first thing people are going to do is start talking. And I think 15 hours is a bit ambitious, because what that means in 15 hours is first we have to recognize there's a problem. And then the people that know that there's a problem have to understand that there's a problem. And then they got to everybody's got to kind of start talking together and everything before they start to figure out what they're going to release to the public. So your 15 hours isn't going to be 15 hours. It might be cut down to 8 hours at that point. And at that point, obviously, the networks are going to light up. Well, the networks aren't built to handle all that traffic. They're based around models that says I'm only going to get X amount during this time. And if I have everybody start to do it, then that starts to take all the networks down. And so you're going to start to have a big impact from that. As that thing continues to move forward, the other big problem that we've always looked at is you're going to have a loss of power. A lot of these sites may have backup generation, but they may only carry like 8 hours of fuel. So when we look at what John Twitchell was talking about, 2 days to several weeks, nobody has several weeks of fuel sitting on the ground and ready to do that. So what you're going to start doing is losing the density of those communications networks. So that, I think, is where you're going to have the largest impact to it from communications. Same thing with you know, you talked about, can I use shortwave radio? Sure, you could use shortwave radio. But the problem is you can't just switch between one type of communications to another, because people aren't trained to use different types of communications. If all of a sudden I go and I hand somebody a shortwave radio and they have no idea what I'm doing, are my procedures and the methods and the way I communicate, the network, the different people I talk to, do I have those radio calls and things set up, those communications paths set up? I mean, if you haven't trained on that kind of stuff, it's very hard to start playing catch up in the middle of the event.
All right. Thank
Yeah,
you. I want to hear from the
Yeah, if you lose GPS, you're going to lose every one of your cell towers. Every single cell radio is designed to have a GPS signal for timing. If it doesn't have a GPS signal, the radio just shuts down. So I think you're going to see widespread failure of the cell networks, and then also your financial transactions are all the timing's all based on GPS as well. So no financial transactions, no cell network, and those things won't come back until you provide that GPS timing. That's just the way they're designed, unfortunately.
Yeah, I'd like to emphasize that. So you're going to lose all manufacturing timing, for instance. So a lot of replacement stuff that you need isn't going to happen because all the robots and all the factories, and they're not going to switch to an atomic clock anytime soon. Plus, you've got not just market financial transactions, but all the credit card systems. A lot of them are either satellite communications or their systems are all timed on GPS. And so nobody's going to be able to go to the store to buy the emergency supplies they want unless they have actual physical cash. And the banks won't be ready to operate and hand out any more physical cash. All the ATMs will not work because of the same timing problem.
Dr. Spalding, any thoughts there?
No, I absolutely agree.
Okay, so to me, what I'm hearing is we may have a house of cards that might be blown down by solar winds, and communications is highly important to our emergency management approach to things. So let me take it back to our emergency managers. So we've now lined this up. What does this mean to you at this point, given what you've just heard?
I'll take this one. I'm trying to follow here the timeline of the scenario. All these alerts and all these things that are happening right now, for the emergency management perspective, they're gonna trigger a line of events for the coordination of the response. At this point, we already passed the messaging, we're already past the preparedness. Whoever was not prepared, being the power sector, the private sector, the supply chain of food and medications, pharmaceuticals, this is the time that we just gonna have to face reality, and everybody have to come to the table and try to provide the best possible response in a very short period of time. From the emergency management perspective, we will go first with life-saving, life-sustaining. That's like our, basic for everything that we do. All these other areas, the utilities, they're gonna be on the table providing and doing information sharing for decision-making process at the top level. But at the emergency managers, at the local, at the state, at this point, this event is already happening and we are in a complete response mode. We're gonna have activated our emergency operations centers across the nation, from the federal to the local to the municipals and counties and parishes, and they're gonna have to start executing whatever plan they have for something like this. Not every plan is gonna be identical, but every plan should have some basic structure that we can all follow. And as we talk about the power grid, there's gonna have to be a coordination. Emergency managers, we do not direct that kind of action, but we do have the information sharing structure to make those high-level decisions, how to best respond to the public. Private sector, power grid, they're gonna be doing their thing. That's what they know what to do. We're gonna be taking care of the public. Whoever didn't prepare, those are gonna be coming to our line first. Hospitals are gonna come first. Another thing that I wanna add before I pass it to the next person is like my experience as a survivor of another event that resulted in a black sky event for months. It was like even having backup system and generators, those generators need maintenance. They cannot run forever and ever just because you put fuel on them. So when we're talking about black sky events and possible like long term, we have to also plan for, okay, you have that backup system, for how long can you actually have that backup system up? And again, as Scott said, fuel is gonna be another issue. Over.
All right, Dave.
Yeah, I was just thinking that communications wise, we would be activating our ham radio partners. Much of what we've practiced with earthquakes and other things is being reliant on packet radio and that sort of thing to pass messages to critical infrastructure or to other sectors of the government.
Okay, so this takes me to that question of the backup communications, and when we have a number of our normal methods that are not operating as we would like, do we currently have, I'll say anywhere in the world, redundant networks or capabilities that will be in place? And the flip side of this is, how are we going to get information to the public? I don't have to have an answer on this, but are we really prepared to have a nationwide or continent-wide event and still have an ability to communicate to the public? I'm seeing a lot of our legs of the chairs disappearing here.
Yeah, I mean, we've put hardened AM radio stations out there. We have teams that go out to the AM radio stations. The problem is that they have no way of receiving any messages from the federal government. So they can transmit on AM radio, but they don't know what to transmit because they have no way of getting that message. And then more importantly, most of the public doesn't have access to an AM radio because it's not something that we use on a daily basis. Some people do have that, and so then could get a message, but unfortunately, you know, we rely to a large extent on our cell phones for even nationwide messaging. You may remember several months ago, we sent out a nationwide alert to everybody's cell phones, which is a great capability. Unfortunately, that's not a survivable capability.
Okay, so here's a challenge for all the sectors out there. How do we build robust capabilities for that very bad day? Do you have any questions for the other panels in here? Because if not, I'm going to move on to phase 3, because if I'm going to make a bad day, we're going to make a bad day worse. That's just kind of how I like to exercise with these discussions. All right, not hearing any. Leahy.
Bring it.
Holidays. I was hoping that we will stick with one pane. Now we have another one.
One of the big challenges is in the medical field, and that has to do with passing of prescriptions to pharmacies to issue drugs. So a lot of the pharmacies can't issue drugs because they can't have a way, their system goes offline. They can't get the actual prescription delivered from the hospital. So CVS and Walgreens end up selling a lot of their products on their shelves, but the most important part is the medicine, and they can't deliver that.
I saw that during a power outage where people were in a store where they could not get anything. Yeah, it's a lot of interconnected systems, and you lose one, you lose another. And that's kind of what we're aiming for here, because this is pulled from the world we're in today. We have a significant hack that's happening right now regarding communication systems. We've had others recently. So we asked the question, would somebody take advantage of a coronal mass ejection coming towards Earth, knowing there were going to be significant impacts, and would they launch an opportunistic cyber attack? We went with the idea of, we think somebody could do that. We think somebody is smart enough, nation state or supported hackers, that type of thing. Leahy, please play the video.
Starting last night, a wave of ransomware attacks have been hitting organizations with weaker cybersecurity in a number of locations. That includes critical lifeline utilities. Now, while directed attacks have been mostly limited to national icons, the nature of these attacks is worrisome. The technology used was able to bypass some very secure systems. This thing is beginning to look more serious than just a conventional ransomware attack. Intermittent power outages across most of the regions of US, Europe, Asia. There have been sporadic outages at communications networks, cell phone service, spotty in many areas.
Give you a sense of how this event is affecting major cities. This natural gas drying plant's control systems were attacked, causing the facility to cease operations. That caused a number of power grid regions to go down, including a chemical plant here, whose backup generator failed to operate a chemical refrigeration unit, causing a minor explosion and a fire to break out.
We are seeing heavy disruptions to standard communications at this point. Information available to the public is becoming more and more limited. A number of major internet cloud providers have been attacked, causing retrieval disruptions, site slowdowns, and data loss for many users. We are now seeing attacks around the world on nearly all critical lifeline networks. In some countries, the developing financial crisis is more serious than in others. Here is a UK news broadcast.
Because most banks, financial services, and insurance companies are closed, many companies can't pay employees and commodity distribution has slowed substantially. The government is planning to meet with EU and Asian finance ministries and banks to explore options for emergency financial mechanisms. It's a mostly cash economy in the UK at this point, and with banks closed, people's supplies of cash are dwindling.
All right, thank you, Leahy. So I'm going to take this back to each of the panels. We've taken down communications. We have issues with power. and now we have a cyber attack. So how do you find the correct information that you can use to get through the cyber attack? Do you have folks in place with enough capabilities? Are you reliant on external resources? And in the interest of time, I'll just throw this out as an overhead question so that we can all have a chance to answer it rather than go by panels. Thank you.
Hi.
Go ahead,
as the
Deepa.
yeah, I was wondering, should I go first as the electric panel?
That's fine.
Yes, please.
Yeah. So cyber attacks, we're seeing more and more of them every day, even without a solar flare, and it's one of the main key risk areas for both the UK government and for national grid. In this scenario, we rely a lot on our pre-established incident response plans. So we exercise and cyber attacks regularly, and we have in-house simulations of cyber exercises on a group level as well as on tactical level, on a strategic level, and we have a cyber response team who would be called in to build up defenses against any cyber attacks to our grid system or our control rooms. So a lot of our resources would be based on our pre-established incident response, and we would also be relying on our backup communication channels. For example, Optel lines that would connect different control centers across the UK from the control room, from control rooms across the north or the east or the south in order to keep the grid running. And before the cyber attack, we'll be relying on a great deal of cyber hygiene practices to ensure all our employees are trained and fully prepared in order to maintain that protective wall against cyber attacks. So we have an incident response structure when it comes to cyber attacks. So it starts from our cyber response team right up to gold level response.
Okay, and I guess a number of times we'll need information from external sources as to how to best address the type of attack that we've received. And I want to throw this out. Is that redundant enough in your systems to be able to reach out, or can you handle everything internally? So I'll throw that out to everybody as well.
I'd like to comment here. I know we're kind of not naming names, but I think we know who the opponents are. Two countries in Asia that would be likely to facilitate this. In California, at least, they've converted a huge amount of generating capacity to solar and battery systems that are manufactured in China. And these systems are managed by people in China. I have friends that work as technicians in those systems. And when they need to shut off the power to the battery systems to go in and facilitate maintenance, they call Beijing, and the Beijing people shut the system down. They don't need to hack us necessarily. So it's hard to secure yourself against a system that you've outsourced to an aggressor state.
Okay. And if somebody has left a Trojan horse for a bad day and activates it before we have the communications losses, that's kind of the type of attack we were thinking of. And I see there's another aspect there of just the ability to shut down. So we have multiple ways of having a bad day. Any other thoughts on this? We have a few more minutes.
Yeah, I was just going to say, one of the things that's important to do this, when you're looking at from not just from a cyber perspective, but from multiple layers of this, is you have to have that system that's independent of the network. I mean, that's the best way to protect it. And one of the things that we've been working on, and we've been working with the electric utilities on, is the thing we talk about, the energy sector web, which is, we're trying to build something there that's not part of the normal network, that's EMP protected, that's separate. And the big thing is that it's maintained and controlled by the electric utilities, because a lot of the restoration right now relies back to the commercial telecoms, not just something that utilities own and control themselves. And so we see things like the Salt Typhoon attack where we know that they're into these networks and stuff. And we can't rely on that because to us, the kind of the cog of all this critical infrastructure is the electric, right? I mean, everything runs on electric. And we talked about doing a black start restoration, like we have the book about the black start restoration. But in order to do black start effectively, we have to have communications. It's not going to be the 2 days to 15 or to several weeks that John was talking about if we don't have the right communications in place. It could be months. And the longer that we go without power, the worse the problem becomes of cascading infrastructure failures. The loss of life goes up, and it becomes much, much harder to restore from every day that goes past. So I just wanted to kind of throw that out there. It's important to have those communications systems that are already separated, already firewalled off, and that maybe have some focused areas to restore critical infrastructure.
All right, thanks, Scott. I think we have time for maybe one more comment in here, and then we're going to turn it over to Paul here in a moment.
Ranger, this is Dave. Since there's several emergency managers in the audience, I'd just like to recommend, as you do your exercises, occasionally do one where you turn off the internet, turn off communications, and see just how you're going to operate in your EOC or out to others. You don't want to have to face it in real life without at least having tested it in an exercise.
Yeah, the operational value of pencil and paper. All right, I first want to thank all of the panelists. I realized we could have made a whole day discussion out of all these points, any one of them. And I appreciate you being here, appreciate the subject matter expertise. I'm going to turn it over to Leahy and Paul at this point to wrap us up. Thank you. And thanks to the audience. The comments are awesome.
Thank you so much, Ranger. As always, fantastic job facilitating this event. I would like to give the stage to Paul Williams, our dearest EAS Council President, for closing remarks. And thank you, everyone, for participating.
Great. Thanks very much, Leahy, and to Ranger and all of the panelists, and indeed to the participants for the active discussion in the chat. It's a sobering scenario, isn't it? And I made the same remark at the end of last year's EarthX, because I always arrive at the same conclusion. That's a rather grim conclusion, which is if you haven't prepared for one of these kinds of scenarios, then you're probably not going to survive it. And a lot of what's come out of this discussion, particularly around the communications point, we're deluding ourselves, aren't we? If we think we can communicate to an entire continent's worth of people with an 8-hour window and expect them to be prepared for some kind of catastrophic event. So you have to be prepared in advance. And the purpose of EIS Council is to do precisely that, is to shine a light on these issues and to start building that preparedness. To use a horrible cliche, it's a journey, not a destination. But these regular discussions are an important part of that process. I was also reminded as the discussion was taking place, and I'm sure it's been mentioned before, I think Sweden might be the only country that does it, but their government publishes a document to their entire populace on a regular basis. It was first published at least 6 years ago. It was republished this year, which probably tells you a lot around their state of mind around the risk environment in which we operate. But it's called If Crisis or War Comes. And it runs to some 30 pages, giving the population advance notice on how to prepare and deal with these catastrophic kind of events, from malicious attacks such as war, all the way through to severe weather events. It's available to download from the Swedish government website. If you have trouble finding it, let us know. We'll point you at it. But it continues to be, I think, an example of best practice. I like it because of its simplicity and its bluntness. I struggle to see perhaps some other Western governments being able to be so bold as to publish something such as that, but that doesn't mean it doesn't need to be published. Other observations then, I interact with firms on a regular basis around the broader topic of resilience, and there's a number of themes that come out of those discussions that are relevant, I think, to the exercise. There's a general confusion over the difference between risk and resilience, and there's a tendency to conflate the two. Resilience is the capability you have when your risk management fails and the risk crystallizes beyond your appetite. That gets coupled with a failure of imagination in planning for severe but plausible scenarios. placing too much emphasis on risk management to manage impacts to an acceptable level. And there's this consistent presence of normalcy bias, making it hard for firms to focus on these events ahead of time. And I wrote about that on LinkedIn earlier this year. Challenges in understanding the reach, scope, and subsequent exposure to nth party risks. Financial regulators, I know, are very focused on this. The concept of cascading failures arose during the discussion, and this cascade failure is going to happen haphazardly. It's going to happen chaotically, and actually, that's going to have the effect of amplifying uncertainty within the broader population and impacts amongst those responsible for trying to recover the situation. And Ranger talked about the observed human behaviour not being ideal, perhaps, in these situations. And I think this is particularly important. There's a tendency for firms to overestimate their ability to manage communications and customer outcomes in situations of extreme uncertainty. Understanding what's happened, understanding what's impacted, understanding the effect on the business and services and your customers and how to manage those outcomes in these scenarios represents perennial challenges. And I think the exercise has touched on all of these points. The only other thing that I'd like to flag is that we need to think differently about these things. Focusing on these scenarios is precisely how you set about starting to build resilience to them. But the digital transformation that underpins our modern world, it brings vast opportunities, but also enormously dangerous undercurrents. We've got this global metagrid of interconnectedness and interdependency. And if one continent had a failure of the scale we've discussed today, that would undoubtedly cascade to other countries and other continents as well. Relying on risk management processes, it's a temporary illusion. My experience is risk frameworks are often where you hide in plain sight all the things that you don't want to do something about. So your risk framework could be misleading you and your board and generating false comfort. So risk and resilience, it requires new thinking and new approaches to meet these challenges. And that should be based in understanding vulnerability and being concerned with consequences. One of our partners, the Australian Risk Policy Institute, has published something called Strategic Risk Policy, which calls out how we should be thinking about risks differently and how we should be focused on vulnerability management. It resonates enormously with me, and I would point you to it because hopefully it will resonate with you as well. We're at time. Enormous thanks to the EIS team and to the panelists again for their help with today's scenarios. The intention was to make it thought-provoking. I hope that was the case. And in that context, I hope that it was useful. We look forward to seeing you again soon, and thank you very much for your participation.
Thank you, everyone. Enjoy your holidays or with your people that you love, and hope to see you next time. Thank you.
Happy holidays all. Thank you for your
Happy holidays
participation.
all. Thank you.